Welcome everyone, should be live. Day 13, stream 13 of the war in Ukraine. Got flight radar up, live way map, and the live streams of Kyiv. Again, more kind of diplomatic back and forth today. Zelensky very prominent. Ukrainian president speaking to the UK Parliament. Welcome everyone. Let me move this over. Just had a Freddo. I don't know how much a Freddo is worth these days. This one was a gift to me. I don't know if I should have eaten it or if actually it was an investment. Welcome Fafnir, Fighter Smurf, Thomas, Rip and Dip, Billy, Kaki from Georgia. How are things in Georgia, Kaki? Andrew, Margak, Cesar, Techno, Fighter Smurf, Zach, Chris, Alison, Alex, Eric, Stefan, another Chris as well, Andrew, Vlatka, Oliver, Connor, Ari. Welcome along everyone. Day 13. In a way it's not a big number, in a way it is a big number. The world was very different 14 days ago, but perhaps some of the issues that were in place around before this that have led to this conflict did exist, we just weren't aware of them in inverted commas the West. Perhaps we weren't aware of them because to use those issues as a justification to invade Ukraine and try and overthrow the government in Kyiv perhaps wasn't a particularly rational move. Welcome Kevin from Dallas and Just Paper ASMR. What is paper ASMR like? Do I have any paper? I've got my old party rings. Do people like that? I've never done an ASMR stream. This is a Freddo. Am I onto something there? Dave, we ignored them. Cesar says no. Daniel says yes. Margaret says no. Okay. Andrea, so there's supposed to be a ceasefire tomorrow. Actually, I need to get... bear with me. I need to get my sources up. I don't have them at the moment. Been watching various debates today as well. I saw the ex-head of MI6 in the UK was at the Oxford Union, and he spoke about how he's been very close to Putin since 2002. Well, not close, but had met him personally a number of times. And he's noticed a change in Putin since the pandemic. And he's perhaps come a bit more isolationist or isolated, as we've spoken about. Other big news today, the US, I think, is immediately banning any imports of Russian oil, and the UK has led on, in Europe, I think, on committing to ban it throughout or at some point during this year. I think the European Union as a whole, and particularly Germany, aren't willing to commit to that. They're too reliant. Dude, where is this plane heading? This is just a tanker circulating. If you have any planes you would like us to track, then we can do that. We've got Flight Radar Gold on this stream, so we can track multiple flights. Can't see Forte 12 in the air. Again, the type of plane that we haven't tracked yet is a B-52. It would be interesting to track one of those. Welcome, Lee. Thanks, Lee. I got a lot of heat in my... I was streaming this evening from 6 o'clock maybe till 10 o'clock on Gran Turismo 7, and I got a bit of heat for ending that to stream Ukraine, but it's important. Maybe both are important, but I get it as well. Evening, Katie. Hope you are well. Dave, maybe COVID changed Putin's mind. There seems to be, even the imagery of when Putin is meeting his generals, the imagery is... Don't we have this on satellite? Doesn't seem to be recognising. Live viewing map seems to be a bit bugged. I did subscribe to it on this YouTube account. But anyway, we've got the old school map. But yeah, the imagery seems to be of one that he sits at the end of these very long tables, and the imagery is very stark. Like I don't know what he's afraid of, but it's not like everyone is sitting in a nice way. They're not sitting around a big table, big circular table. All his generals are sat together on one side. Although he did, I think, yesterday have a meeting with some air stewards and stewardesses at Aeroflot, where he was in table. Russia don't want to occupy, and Putin's been trying to bring them back to Minsk 2. It seems like a pretty weird way to try and enforce Minsk 2, right? If you try and enforce Minsk 2, or Russia made commitments as well, but there were general demilitarization commitments, but you'd think the invasion would be limited to the Donbass region, Crimea. Well, since when is this a news channel, my guy? I respectfully disagreed with you should reach people. I'm really sorry about that, but I streamed on the first night because I felt like it was a very powerful and important day that would affect a lot of people, and I thought it was important to stream about it, so I'm very sorry you feel that way, and it's not your fault. I'm entitled to. Sick boy, Russia has never been so weak. Will NATO miss this opportunity? I think from what I've been reading, NATO is very keen to frame what it's doing as a in support of Ukraine's sovereignty. So it's really not a war against Russia, it's support of Ukraine. Thanks, Don Bender. 52 Ohio, USA. I've been watching for over a week. You're doing a great job. Thanks, Don Bender, if you've been watching the background. Hope it's been a comforting space. Right, another tanker from Rip and Dip. Let's put it in. Oh, is that the one we were tracking? Okay. Is that the only tanker at the moment with a transponder on? Because that is very unusual, right? Even, what was it? Deuce 43 or something? It wasn't Deuce 43. What was it called? Duke 43. Is not running, not in the air, at least not does have transponder on. Thanks, Tyler. Yeah, so what's the feeling in the US? We have a large contingent of very interested US viewers of these streams. I understand that the bill to ban Russian imports of oil has bipartisan support. Having bipartisan support is not always the most common thing. I've never actually been to Washington, DC, I'm afraid. So I don't know my way around this map. Right, there's Lincoln Memorial, Washington, Smithsonian, and there's the Capitol. Okay. There's the Capitol. And I presume, I may be wrong, but is this the Senate and this is the House? So this is Congress. I may be wrong, but Jedi, only 4%. New picture for Jedi? Only 4% of US oil is from Russia. So easier for Russia to do, easier for the UK to do, because I understand the UK only has 5% of its gas imports from Russia. obviously for Germany, Nord Stream 1 already exists as a pipeline. So there is a pipeline directly supplying Germany. Yeah, I know Congress is both chambers, but is this the Senate and this is the House of Representatives? Welcome, Train Spotting. Welcome, John, as well in the Philippines. Good to see everyone. Good to see everyone's well. I've seen a lot of statements today because and again, it's one of these difficult ones. It may be that militarily Russia has a different approach to losing troops and losing equipment. They may be more expendable. They may be, inverted commas, cheaper than under like modern Western military doctrine. But if you take it that the Russian invasion is not going to plan, and by the way, I think the CIA released their estimates of Russian deaths, and they are much lower than the Ukraine estimates, although they're still in the thousands. So but there is a consensus that you don't want to back Putin into a corner, because if you back Putin into a corner, he's more likely to try and escalate his way out of the situation. And something I was reading about in terms of the changes in Putin's approach was something that I'm quite interested in. Seems to be that although he started as a reformist, so under the Yeltsin years, Russia had to emerge as a state and what the role of the state was amongst private enterprise. And so it was very difficult for Yeltsin to do that. But then Putin's initial role was as a reformer to try and get the economy stable and stabilize Russia, which it's hard to argue that he didn't. But at some point, it looks as though he turned into his mandate turned to one to restore Russia to its former glories. And to restore Russia to its former glories is very difficult to balance with a fully sovereign Ukraine that would be able to elect a government that is more Western leaning. No worries, Katie. Used to it. Tyler, do you think Iran and Russia will team up? I'm not sure Iran is too happy about this because I think Iran is quite worried about potential famine, and from what I understand, the impacts this will have on the global kind of agricultural economy, I think perhaps aren't that clear. Let's search that plane, Mark Richards. Oh, is it just oil by the end of 2022? Okay, sorry. I was incorrect. Well, it's Nile 76. Purportedly going to Nepal. So it is a transport plane and it's heading up over here. We can keep it on the tracker. Evening DJ, the man with the beards. Welcome Captain Polish. Welcome Mark Pendleton. Sonia, there are a few US Air Force fighter jets flying alongside RAF fighter jets over southeast England. I'm not sure whether that is abnormal even outside of joint exercises. Obviously, the US operates a lot of military aircraft from Royal Air Force bases. For example, this one, RAF Mildenhall. I'm afraid, although this is RAF Mildenhall, this is where the Ospreys are. And I think these, I'm going to get it wrong. They're not C-17s. But the cargo planes here, I don't know exactly where Bryce Norton is, actually. Is it closer to Oxford? RAF Bryce Norton. We can zoom in on Bryce Norton if Someone can let me know where that is. Interesting Bombardier plane. Wonder where that's going. Whoa. That has come from New York. And is going beyond London. Oh, no, it's going into Luton. Okay, it's landing at Luton Airport. We can track this one on the approach, actually. Bear with me. I'll get more slick at this. There we go. Liam, do you think Russia are any closer to achieving their objectives? I don't know, to be honest. It's difficult to say. There are a lot of ex-NATO commanders who say Russia is really struggling. It's just hard to tell. I mean, ultimately, you know, there are different maps, but most of the maps seem to indicate that Russia is not too far away from achieving its aims of really establishing a land corridor to Crimea, to also connecting its northern and kind of southern fronts, and also making significant inroads kind of north of Odessa here, and also, you know, to some extent surrounding Kyiv now from the north, west and the east. Welcome, Matthew Tillman. You sound like Super GT. Hello, viewers. Sorry, I missed a lot of chat. Welcome, Alex. Sorry, I missed a lot of chat there. Yeah, famine and the effect this will have on the global economy and fundamental resources like oil and gas and wheat, grain and fertilizer is... don't think it's clear yet. Sorry, did anyone say where Bryce Norton is? So you do get these planes. Oh. Where do I think RAF Bryce Norton would be? I feel like it would be somewhere around here. Find Oxford and follow the A40 west. Okay. I have actually flown aircraft around here. There's an RAF base next to there's a power plant. And when I was younger, I used to fly aircrafts. Don't know if anyone knows where that is. I probably should know. It's a very English town, isn't it? Brightwell, Upperton. There's a power plant, or was a power plant somewhere around here. Maybe it's Didcot. Isn't Didcot have a power plant? And there was a little RF base where I used to fly when I was younger. RAF Benson. This is where I used to fly. So I've flown little planes here, actually. Jim, getting those jets from Poland. Yeah, we've talked about it for quite a few days now, and it seems to be that... Okay, what I suspect that notwithstanding the US is kind of back to backing it with the promise of exporting F-16s, I suspect the issue is that Poland doesn't want to stand alone, put its head above the parapet as a country that is going well beyond its European counterparts in providing military aid by actually providing military jets. You know, it doesn't want to put itself above the parapet in terms of Russia there, I suspect. Right, west of Oxford. Oh, here we go. Okay, here is RAF Bryce Norton. And what do we got? So these look like the Strato tankers. Is that a C-130? We'll see if we can see any fighter jets. So if I get all the names wrong. don't think I can see any fighter jets out in the open, but that's RF Bryce Norton. We'll keep above here in case we see a plane come out. Phase, I reckon that's not entirely true. The Polish national spirit is pretty strong, so I think they want. Okay, so what do you think the hold-up is then? I'm just one theory I'm putting out there. Might be completely wrong. Oh, C5 Galaxy. Okay, this is a C5 Gal. Hang on, is this a C5 Galaxy? I thought Bryce Norton was the fighter one and Mildenhall was the cargo plane one, but I may be wrong. This is live UA map on top. It's not recognizing my... Let me see if I can fix it. We should be able to get different views on, but we can't at the moment. We do have a pro subscription active, but it's a little bit buggy, is what it is. Is what it is. RF of Globemaster, not C5. Pollock, they need to remove NATO only sensitive equipment for jets. Okay, fine. Because they're still export jets for NATO countries, perhaps. Oh, train spotting is there. Are you actually at Bryce Norton? Train spotting? I've zoomed out and I lost it. Yeah, I understand that's the plan, James. So USA will replace the MiGs with F-16s, but for whatever reason, that whatever's been agreed is not enough yet for Poland to agree to that. So I don't know what the hold-up is. I saw a interview with the ex-president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, yesterday. Western-leaning politician. He was the president of the country. He's now leading a territorial defense battalion or something like that in Ukraine, which is quite incredible to see. He was very, very passionate about the need for these planes to be made available now. Fairford has had four B-52s. If you let us know where Fairford is, we can go in there. Welcome, Depot Club. Hope all is well in Brazil. Oh, did Poland say today they will deploy it? Maybe I've missed that. I hadn't seen that news that they will deploy it. Welcome, Motorsports Productions. To KRT Corporal. Hope you're enjoying the streams. Thank you for supporting the channel. Crimson, why is everyone pro-Nazi? You saying everyone in the stream is pro-Nazi? That's quite a... Why would you say that? Oh, it's on the map now. Okay. Oh, this is... Was it Fairford? Did I just make that up? Okay, here we go. Right, let's get back in the air. Above or around Ukraine. See if we can see any Eurofighters as well this evening. We'll see if we see anything interesting coming out of Moscow as well. All of NATO is pro-Nazi. I think I'm going to have to ban you. You could just say... Let's ban you. Poland have the jets in Germany now hand over to the USA, who will give them to Ukraine as soon as NATO equipment is out. Okay, fine. So it's advanced. Okay. I've missed that. Interesting concept. I don't know if there is news on how the Ukrainian pilots are going to pick them up. Are they going to fly over in civilian jets or planes or something? Yeah, that's been banned. You can say you can question things, but you can't say that. SHB says the fighter squadrons fire at Coningsby. Okay, if you can let me know where Coningsby is, we can go there. Transponders off. Okay, train spotting's on it as well. Ashray, let him have his free speech. You not see the irony in blocking someone calling you or as Nazis. It's a tough one, isn't it, in a way? But I feel like if you can say, well, hang on, you know, what is going on in the east of Ukraine? You know, or you can say, well, what are Russia's legitimate issues or security issues or provocations? What are the rational reasons for Russia to invade Ukraine? But I didn't feel like we had that. Gil, I'm taking all that Poland MiG-29 stories with a huge grain of sand. Seems a bit showing off rather than official statements. It does seem to be poorly messaged. I think it was messaged first by the EU Commission, which is a weird thing for the EU Commission to do anyway, because it's not really the EU Commission's role. It would be for those individual member states. And I think it was designed to encompass, you know, Hungary and Bulgaria and Romania, and I think those countries are more vocal about saying no, but I may be wrong. Stephen Moore, F-15s on the border at Romania, 10 clips from Ukraine today. Okay. It looks like there's definitely been there's less transponders on, but you would expect there'd be possibly more planes than there were a week ago. This plane has call sign Gold 1. I think it's something on the ground. Great, okay. It's on that point, and this is something I'm really struggling with, is it's nice to think that there can be neutrality. It's nice to think there can be a neutral space. It's nice to think, well, if you believe that there are two sides to every story. So a lot of people say there's two sides to every story. I want to hear the other side. There's two sides. But are there certain things that are just morally the moral truth and what is morally right? And therefore, do you have right and wrong? There aren't two sides. There's right and wrong. And I do wonder sometimes if we can't. This is, you know, for example, like the Russian TV stations that were banned from the UK, they would always talk about giving the other side of the story, like fair and balanced, but some things that happen must just be wrong. If you believe in morals, some things that happen must be wrong by moral standards. And therefore there aren't two sides to those stories. There is stuff that is wrong, and there's no other side to hear about. It's just wrong. The only thing that you could have a two side is someone trying to twist it or do some whataboutism. Jason, there are three sides to every story: side A, side B, and then the truth. But I don't know. For example, when we talk about Ukraine and different governments, some governments looking west, some governments looking east. And we were speaking yesterday that there's been moments of revolution in Ukraine, 2004, Orange Revolution, 2014, the Euromaidan Revolution protests. And you could say that the West has supported those revolutions. And you could say the other side of that as well, that Russia is supporting these independence movements. But there is a difference between supporting them. There must be a difference between supporting revolutions that are aimed to lead towards free and fair democratic elections, if you believe that to be this is a thing. If you believe free and fair democratic elections to be kind of a moral right and good thing, then what Russia's doing cannot be equated. But then a lot of countries are kingdoms. A lot of countries have leaders that have been there for a long time. Look at Belarus. So, but I don't want I don't think it's as simple as, oh, there must always be another side. Some things must just be right and some things must be wrong. So kind of not saying Russia's government are not corrupt, they are, but Ukraine's was a mess in their own, very corrupt for many years. Mark D, civilians being killed is wrong and there is no dispute in that happening. So for example, when you see civilians being killed on the streets of Kharkiv or in Irpin, and there's been all this horrendous footage that no doubt everyone has seen, that must be wrong. That must be wrong, surely. And it's not one of these things where there's two sides to that. That is wrong. Civilians should not be killed. Children should not be killed. That must be wrong. So I don't think the two-side story applies there. What is the other side of the story there? Surely it can only be deception and to confuse and to deflect and to say, oh, it was shelling from the other side. You know, factually speaking, for example, if Russia has shelled civilians, surely that must be wrong. And yes, this is a space that is designed to be a neutral space, and it always has been. And you can put whatever opinion you want to in the chat as long as it's made in a respectful way. So calling everyone Nazis is not a respectful thing to say by anyone's book. But also, we're now on day, what, is it 13? We're now on day 13 of this war. We're a lot more educated about things, so just saying some thoughts, really. Creative Victor, the only way I see Russia winning now with NATO arming Ukraine to the teeth is being willed to slaughter 100,000 civilians. At this point, heavy bombers would have to be used. Yeah, heavy bombers or, howitzers, artillery, the MLRS systems, which seem very indiscriminate. But yeah, just to continue that point, so governments in Kyiv sometimes have, been West-leaning, like Poroshenko and Zelensky, and sometimes, and I can't remember who was the president of Ukraine that was poisoned. I can't remember his name. And sometimes they've been Russian-leaning, like Yanukovych. But if when Yanukovych was in power in Ukraine, the influence of the West is to try and support transparency, to support free speech, to support free and fair elections. Is that wrong? And it may be wrong because I'm living in the context of the West, and those are values of the West. Free speech, free and fair elections. But there are many countries around the world that you would say don't have free speech and don't have free and fair elections. There are many countries around the world run by presidents or whatnot, premiers, and those countries are sovereign. So I can't work it out. But then on the other hand, if after the Euromaidan revolution, Russia's response is to annex Crimea and support an independence movement in the Donbass, is that equivalent to what the West has been doing? Are they both just, well, there's two sides to that. Russia is doing this and the West doing that. I don't know. Viktor Yushchenko. Yeah, Yushchenko was that president. Tony Randall, I do not support Russia, but the 14,000 civilians killed by the East since 2014 killed by both sides, and the 300,000 refugees fled to Russia must not be so wrong. And again, but it cuts both ways. it cuts both ways, right? Because if in the West our values are free speech, free and fair elections, etc., if there is an independence movement in Donbass, in Donetsk and Luhansk, then surely that the right of those people to recognize their independence is a value that the West shares. And the only thing I know about this situation is that I don't know a lot about it. Don't think it's been heavily analysed. It hasn't been part of the news cycle in the West, apart from when MH17 was tragically shot down. So I don't know how much of the independence movement is legitimate. There was a very good point made about, a lot of civilians have fled to Russia in this region. So I just don't know. But what is the West afraid of if there are genuine independence movements here? So, again, putting a lot out there. I don't often speak a lot in these streams, do I? 624 people watching. Welcome, everyone. I was instinctively going to play my my animation, which I won't do. Patricia, my country is in war. You need to understand that there's always propaganda from both sides, and during war, people who want to make peace from both sides have been killed. Stefan, I don't think free speech and free elections are key things here, but a culture of peace in society, no co-living standard. Peter, may peace soon arrive in Ukraine. War and unrest is destroying our world. It's hard to have an opinion or even know what you should consider when you don't know it's true. So Donald Rumsfeld, unknown unknowns. Dave, well, capitalism and freedom is destroying the ecology of the planet because it promotes greed. So is that right as well? Helena, if people would be living like that, not liking the country, they would have spoke up right now. But I understand they have spoke up. But if it's not reported in the West, then sounds like a big mass of people who are not speaking out about that theory. Russia needs a warm weather naval base. They're a world power. They need Sevastopol. But they kind of had Sevastopol already. It looks like NATO and the West had tolerated the annexation of Crimea. Yeah, if you just come in and spam, you've got mods in the air. Shikano, not so far. The three biggest stories from Ukraine have been propaganda. Aaron, the West also believes in rule of law. Yeah, not familiar with Ukraine's constitution, but I imagine provinces can't just leave whenever they want. That's true. Jason, do you think most Russians really oppose the war? I don't know, but I imagine the effect of the sanctions may be that it actually the way it's messaged in Russia may actually galvanize the Russian population against the West in very general terms. Brian, there are enormous shell oil deposits in the east and west of Ukraine off the coast of Crimea. This war is what all wars are about: control of natural resources. That's true. Scarcity. Sherry, I have a terrible feeling about these sanctions. Our entire economic system is so leveraged and intertwined, something is bound to break. I think things are going to get more expensive. DJ Cypher, there is so much about this conflict we do not know. Why now, for example? I think the why now is a very good point, and we've spoken about that a lot before. Didn't seem like the opportune moment for Russia. Debt Poker Club, the world has changed very much since the internet was created in terms of war, killing, except for the way the human race sees things has completely changed. Dylan says some people are bringing up that Ukraine has banned some people from political office. This is done across the world against criminals and extremists, as has been done in the UK. David, Putin uses chemical weapons. Would that force NATO? I'm not sure. Obviously, the incident around the nuclear base. I really wish we could get the satellite map back up here. We'll have this one today. March goals, aren't these sanctions coming extremely close to economic warfare? The lines, I agree, are becoming very blurred. The lines are very blurred. I mean, you know, countries have soldiers that wage war on behalf of the country. What is the difference between waging war in an economic sense on behalf of your countries? Mark D says, if the Russians had stopped taking the Donbass region, would the situation be as bad? You would think it wouldn't be as bad because the West and NATO had tolerated Russia's annexation of Crimea and also what happened in Georgia. But annexation of Crimea and the support of the independence regions and MH17 to the extent that Russia still hosted a Football World Cup, still hosted a Winter Olympics, still was going to host a Champions League final this year, and still hosted a Formula One race. So Russia was these are prominent cultural things. So culturally, the West had tolerated what Russia had been doing. And maybe Russia was emboldened by that, or Putin was emboldened and thought that this wouldn't be significant. But obviously it's a line has been drawn and deemed crossed by the rest. Sorry, I missed a lot of comments there. Deathwish says, how has the world changed with the internet? Commerce has, but that's about it. You can look stuff up, but most don't actually source the info, so it's no different. I think it'd be interesting to hear from people that have lived on this planet for longer when there wasn't the internet. It'd be interesting to know. Rebel says Snake Island is as big news as an invasion of Ukraine by a nation that denies invading Ukraine. Thanks, Stefan, for the 100 Swedish krona, by the way. Assuming with the name Stefan Sandberg and the Swedish krona, you're in Sweden. So it would be interesting to know what the feeling is in Sweden and whether there is a greater movement to join NATO. Kieran, do you think the news that broke today about Poland giving all of its MiG-29s to the US, Poland giving all of its MiG-29s to Ukrainian pilots to use will tip? That news has been out there for a while. I imagine Russia will send some pretty harsh comms out to Poland about it. Thanks, John McCormick, for the 125 Filipino pesos. Hope all is well in the Philippines. Thanks for that, John. Keep it up. City Snipes, the West tolerate all sorts of things, though. If you're looking at purely humanitarian inventions, they'd be sorting out Ethiopia, Eritrea. You don't hear it mentioned yet. Interesting that Eritrea was a country that has voted with Russia in the United Nations Security Council. Obviously, the situation in Yemen as well. South Sudan. Sonia, I have to say I feel bad about the anti-Russian sentiment or mass hysteria that is growing, though. I do think that is a very good point, and you know, you have to remember, after the Second World War, how do you imagine the sentiment was between the French population and the German population? But through the European Economic Community, Marshall Plan, etc., you know, the French and German communities are, you can say, much more aligned than they were at that time. And what is going to happen between it cuts both ways. The Western perception of the Russian population, for example, Russian athletes who are putting the Z or Z sign on their clothing when they're going up to podiums. And what do you think the perception is of the Russian population against the Western population? It's just going to become more divisive, even though we're all humans at the end of the day. Yeah, I saw Ukraine has called back its peacekeepers. Alderoda has put a vampire, the globe, and then a question mark. I don't know what that means. Alexandra says, all elections in Ukraine since 2004 have been free, fair and competitive. Max says Poland wants the US to deal with it. Ah, okay. Again, I'm really sorry, I'm not up on that news. I've been streaming this evening. Ah, okay. I'm reading more about it. Okay, well this is a tweet I can see. Again, I'm really sorry I'm not up to speed on this. I've been streaming Gran Turismo 7. Poland says it's ready to immediately and free of charge send all of their MiG-29 jets to the US in the German airbase. Again, my immediate reaction is that, and it'd be interesting if there's any Polish people watching in the stream, my reaction is that Poland doesn't want to put its head above the parapet, or doesn't want to make itself a target. But I may be wrong on that. Cameron, do you think it'd be fair to supply Ukraine with nukes to use defensively? I think no one's going to supply Ukraine with nukes defensively. Mark says in caps, we all live on one planet, and why can't people stop this war? Because there isn't a spare planet. It's true, but you can say that about a lot of things like war, climate change. It's funny how this planet with human beings pretty much has been constantly at war, you would say. But is that just the ultimate nature of scarcity of resources, and we live in countries to... It's difficult, isn't it? Do we have reason for Russian flights heading south from Moscow going so far east? We tracked a few yesterday. We can see the corridor here. We tracked one going into the Big Boy terminal, or Big Boy Airport at Istanbul, which has 5 runways. And yeah, the airspace corridor has definitely grown since the first stream we did. It'll be mapped by, I imagine, ATC in the region. Let me do I want to do a poll. Welcome Blazing. I want to do a poll. But one we haven't done already. Stefan, is it just me who feels like... sorry. Is it just me who feels like the Earth has shrunk due to the threat of World War III before it felt so big? Now it feels like the Earth is safe and close. Definitely, I think we're a lot more aware of international relations and the proximity of countries, right? And I think someone put it very well in one of the very early streams in terms of one nation's security is another nation's security threat. And that statement by China, Ukraine needs to be a bridge between East and West. Whichever way Ukraine looks is going to be met. It's in a difficult position. I need to think of a poll that has a yes or no answer. If you have any ideas for polls, then let them know in the chat. A poll I was going to do one, but it's not really yes or no. I was going to ask about the MiG-29 jets. Graham, tribal attitudes, human nature, it can't be changed in our genetics. Does that make you sad? Is it in our genetics, or are some people more idealist and some people more realist? And ultimately, in that prisoner's dilemma game theory, realism will always win out. And therefore, the harder you are, the more cynical you are, the more you'll win out in these situations. So that viewpoint will win out. So even if there are good people in the world, will they always be taken advantage of, basically? Kay says, please put don't know. We'll see, because I don't know is always, you can not answer it. Yeah, a lot of people saying, will the MiG-29s be dragged over the border? You imagine that Russia has satellites here as well, and I don't know. It seems to be easier for the Ukrainian pilots to fly them back. I think also the jets wouldn't be able to be transporting with munitions or something. I'm not sure. Thanks, Mr. Gene Fairder. It's not down to me, really. It's down to the community and down to the mods. We're very, very lucky. All I've got to do is be here every night, which I can do. Yes, Kaki, I will check that flight. No idea, mate. Not a Scooby-Doo, I'm afraid. See if we can see any plane. You'd imagine military planes landing at this Polish airport will be coming in with transponder on. Bill, there is an international law that dictates how this goes down. The Poles will have to escort unarmed Ukrainian military planes to Ukraine's airspace. Joe, pessimistic thinking is just for those who can take their hopes not coming to fruition, so they deny any hope. It's very profound. David, what do you think would happen if Russia invaded an EU country now that was not a member of NATO, like Sweden or Finland? Again, I said this yesterday and it's a little bit controversial. I don't think I explained it well. Okay, actually that's what I'm going to put in the poll. Let me put that in the poll. Oh, it's too long. Damn it, these 100 characters. Okay, hang on. Let me just do this. So, okay, this might not be the best poll. Let's see. This is a bit controversial yesterday. The poll is posting. It's spending a lot of time posting. Oh, it's taking a long time actually, chat. Ah, might not have posted. Has it posted? I have to refresh this. It didn't post. Hang on. Oops. Just copy it in case it. This is building up this poll too much, isn't it? It's putting too much pressure on it. Okay, let's see if it posts. Okay, it's posted. What do you think of that poll? By the way, do feel free to hit the like button if you want. I'm not going to play my like thing. Unless people want to hear it, it does feel like a quieter night. At the moment, certainly yes 57, likely yes 36. So Mr. Gene Further says Article 5 is non-negotiable. So if you think Article 5 is non-negotiable, the answer to that question would be certainly yes. If you think Article 5 is there on paper, but if you're a capital R realist, there's always a decision to be made, then you would be at most likely yes, but you wouldn't be certainly yes. I'm sorry I haven't put a not sure or anything. I've done certainly yes, likely yes, unlikely. So if you're a very staunch capital R realist, and you also believe that it wouldn't be in NATO's interest to do that, you would put unlikely no, I think. If you're a staunch realist and you believe it would be in NATO's interest to do that, because perhaps NATO would want that, it would be the justification, then it would be certainly yes. MT, has Article 5 ever been tested? Yes, it's been invoked once after September 11th by the USA. Interesting plainness. I wonder what's going. Josh, they have to honour Article 5 for all NATO countries. If not, NATO falls apart. CP, I think they'll be forced to respond. Letting a small country get attacked would collapse NATO and force the closure of US bases across Europe. It might be a bit of a too hypothetical question, because let's say, for example, Estonia, if there are US bases here, US troops, we understand there are US troops, then it's not just do you stand by, it's do you actively withdraw. Sean says Article 5 against Russia, yes. China, well, let's discuss further and we'll get back to you. Maxwell says it's a NATO decision, not a decision for any one country. Yeah, so they would decide whether to recognise it, I think. Dylan, well, to be a realist, isn't the sovereignty of Ukraine supposed to be protective? With greater respect, I don't think that's a realist. A realist just recognises the reality of the situation, in their view, and just does whatever's right for them or for their state. Katie, how quick did they respond after 9/11? I can't remember exactly, actually. I know it was a bit controversial being used, and there are interviews that the General Secretary, who was head of NATO at the time, has given about the invocation. It seemed to be in the balance. For example, if the winds were not in that direction, it wouldn't have been invoked. When if they don't uphold Article 5, then there's no point in NATO existing. Phage, that's the thing. NATO has its own national security to consider. In that national security is continuation of government. That's all NATO exists for. Pollock agrees with Josh. Decpo Club is issuing his own sanctions from Brazil. Techno agreed they have to do Article 5. If they don't, countries will pull out. Backburners, Article 5 breaches would make most other international defence pacts negotiable, make this world hell. That's true. Fion, do you think World War III would... Ukraine is not in NATO. William Young. I think you know that you've been in the streams quite a few days. Bill Bopperton, you guys are all thinking way too big for what Russia is actually capable of. I think Moldova is the only other country Putin will consider annex. Well, let's do Moldova in the next poll then. Gil says there have been a huge debate already on Article 5 and cyber attacks too. I think Article 5 is now a bit more grey than it used to be. Lloyd, what's the yellow GTR using only? That was an R34 Skyline that I bought from the used car dealership. MT says, I'm guessing not likely unless it's a big player. Brian says this won't de-escalate. Sean says NATO would not probably because they're more interested in not causing nuclear war. Mark says realism in international relations is different general view of realism. Let's know more about that, Mark. So we got 230 views. It's 6 votes. 60% certainly yes at the moment. 30% likely yes. Steve, NATO and EU want no part of this war. They know the situation exacerbated by US. Sean, is Ukraine the first country to give up its nukes and then be invaded? I actually don't know other countries that have given up nuclear weapons. So I think it's much more unlikely now that countries will give up nuclear weapons. For example, there's always been a debate in the United Kingdom about the United Kingdom nuclear deterrent, which is submarine based. And at times it has been in question for budgetary reasons, or the questions have been raised. I imagine if it was up for renewal now, it would be a very strong bipartisan, yes, we should renew it, I would imagine. Sean, if Russia invaded an Article 5 country, NATO would push sanctions like they are now, but they would still not respond with massive military power because they would start nuclear war. Beyond drop frames right on my question. Sorry, did we drop any frames? Oh, you didn't. What was your question? So, let me know your question again, Sean Cooney. South Africa gave them up. That rings a bell. I can't remember why South Africa had nuclear weapons in the first place. It does ring a bell, actually, but I'm afraid I don't know too much about that situation. Don't think Iran has ever given up nuclear weapons. Iran has been at various stages of trying to develop a nuclear weapon. GT, the Carpathian Mountain theory. Russia wants to put the Carpathians in the west to make invasions hard. I have actually cycled over a little bit of the Carpathian Mountains. So I cycled... I actually want to work out where I cycled. Where did I cycle to? I think I was in Orsova. I cycled over the mountain somewhere. This is like the end of the Carpathian Mountains. I cycled from Belgrade. I think I went to this town here, Smederevo. And I think I went to this town, Moldova Vech. I think I was in Ostrovia, but I really can't remember. So it's probably not very exciting to watch, but I think I may have cycled over here. It's really the foot, it's not really the mountain, it's like the end of them. I'm afraid I don't know. Well, but if NATO does not invoke Article 5 when the member is invaded, there is no point in having NATO. I personally disagree. The fact it's there is a deterrent. So to say, I really strongly disagree with that. For example, nuclear weapons. There is no guarantee that a country would actually use their nuclear weapons as a deterrent. There's no guarantee. I mean, theoretically they should. But if you launch your nuclear weapons, you have the blood of, millions on your hands, irrespective of what's coming your way. And so if you're NATO to recognise Article 5 against Russia, you are green-lighting World War III. And you are green-lighting probably millions and millions of deaths. So I disagree, but that's only my opinion. It may be wrong. It's just my opinion. I can't remember where I was here. I think I was in this town here. I'll find out and I'll find out and I'll let you know next time. Refresh the map, we can do that. Yeah, so a bit of a fracture appearing here, right, in terms of the MiG-29 proposal. It has seemed very messy. Techno, okay, the fact it's there is a deterrent. Kamal? Oh, we haven't checked that out. Yeah, I agree, Village. I don't think NATO involvement automatically equals NATO response. So if you believe that a war could be a conventional war could be fought with Russia and for that to not spill over into nuclear conflict because of mutually assured destruction. Bill, the Baltic states all have troops from nuclear-armed NATO member states. Article 5 is a blood pact deterrent. A conventional invasion of Latvia would result in direct combat between Russia and US. Yeah, because there are American troops there and also I think like joint NATO forces now. Basically, and again, I haven't followed this. It's really breaking now. So here we go. Pending a response to Poland's proposal on jets, we will continue to consult with Poland and other NATO allies about this issue, but we do not believe Poland's proposal is tenable. Basically, it seemed to be, so 500 people watching. This is the chronology as I remember and understand and have just seen it develop now. So a few days ago, when sanctions were being launched by the European Commission left, right and centre, the European Commission president was very strong in sanctions against Russia, saying it would hurt the European Commission and European states, but it's worth it. Someone in the European Commission, I think, said that there was a deal existed for certain European Union states. It wasn't a NATO thing. This is a European Union thing, which was very interesting. Why I found it interesting. Certain European Union states in the east would provide fighter jets to Ukraine. Don't think much more was said. Now we discussed it and we thought, okay, these jets really going to have to be either MiG or Sukhoi fighter jets that the Ukrainian pilots will be trained on, because Ukrainian pilots won't have had training on F-16 jets, for example, and that's another ball game. So who's like to have MiG and Sukhoi aircraft? Well, Baltic states, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. Then pretty soon statements started coming out from these countries. I distinctly remember Hungary and Bulgaria saying we're not interested. Now there was a potential conflation because at that time there was also discussions about enforcing a no-fly zone, which is a very different proposition. And so it's possible that these countries were saying no to the no-fly zone. It was all a bit confusing. Then a couple of days ago there was this proposal now solely on Poland, which I think has about 70 MiG-29 jets, whereby Poland would be willing to provide them to Ukraine if Poland was going to receive F-16 jets. Well, this seemed to be coming from the United States. The United States was saying, we will provide Poland with F-16 export so they can provide the MiG-29 jets. And then today we seem to be hearing pretty clearly from Poland that they can go with this, but they're going to provide the MiG-29 to the United States. To me, that seems to be that Poland don't want to be the country that has their hand is too closely associated with this. If it's a United States proposition and the United States are pushing it, then it's up to the United States to put these aircraft in Ukrainian hands. And I might be wrong, but my perception on that is that Poland doesn't want to be a country that is putting its head above the parapet. So Poland is going to may have to live with a border with Russia or a Russian-controlled Ukraine and Belarus. And by the way, the context in Poland is at the end of last year, in the winter, 2021, there was a huge issue on the Polish-Belarusian border. I don't know how much has made the news globally, but in Poland it was dominated the news about refugees, I think from the Middle East, progressing from Belarus into Poland, and Poland closed the borders and didn't let them through, and it was very close to escalating on a lot of occasions. So Poland is going to have to bear the brunt of this border. I mean, Poland's border with Russia essentially is going to straddle Kaliningrad, heavily Russian influenced Belarus, and then Ukraine. So that's my take on it. Debt Club, you're right. The providing of aircraft is a hot potato. But if you disagree with that, if you have another view, then let us know. That's just, for anyone who doesn't know anything about it, that's my take on it. Mark says space laser will stop large missiles. You start to pick holes in mutually assured destruction if one side has the ability to shoot down the other's missiles. You actually make nuclear war more likely, paradoxically. Alexander says they have Tesla weapons. This isn't Command & Conquer Red Alert. Matthew, completely agree. They want their hands washed. Michael Bond, I think it's 27 jets. Sorry, forgot that wrong. Marcus, all about logistics. Chivio, Poland wanted to give them over. The US said no. Then they gave in and told them to go ahead. Ukraine is sending pilots to Poland to pick up just now. So again, I don't. This is developing right now. So Dylan, Michael Weiss has a good Twitter thread. Apparently, Polish ministers jumped the gun, speaking on what was supposed to be a covert thing. We can try and find that. We can get that up. Enhance. Right, here's an apparent statement by the Pentagon press secretary. Let's just read it here. I can't remember who in chat said hot potato, but that is perhaps an apt analogy. I don't know, I may be wrong. We are now in contact with the Polish government following a statement issued today. As we have said, the decision about whether to transfer Polish-owned planes to Ukraine is ultimately one for the Polish government. We will continue consulting with our allies and partners about our ongoing security in Ukraine because, in fact, Poland's proposal shows just some of the complexities this issue presents. The prospect of fighter jets at the disposal of the US departing from a US NATO base in Germany to fly into airspace that is contested with Russia over Ukraine raises serious concerns for the entire NATO alliance. It is simply not clear to us that there is a substantial rationale for it. We will continue to consult with Poland and our other NATO allies about this issue and the difficult logistical challenges it presents, but we do not believe Poland's proposal is a tenable one. So, absolutely fractious. And I was saying a few days ago, it was pretty extraordinary how the response from the West seemed to be pretty unified. There didn't seem to be any cracks in the armour or anyone going further, anyone not going further. Since Germany and Italy and Cyprus purportedly were slow on SWIFT, once a SWIFT ban came in on day 2 or day 3 of the war, it seemed to be pretty united. What we've seen today is the US has led on banning Russian oil. It's gone way beyond, I think, anyone else. Germany has said they really don't want to ban Russian oil. And the United Kingdom has gone further than I think anyone else in Europe. So there's fractions starting to appear there, less united. And again, this on the airplanes has always seemed to be a messy story. Thomas, Russia warned Poland that today there will be retribution if Poland supplied jets to Ukraine. Thanks, Michael. Yeah, if you are enjoying the stream and the space, do feel free to hit the like button. Doesn't mean you're liking a particular viewpoint. It just means that you sends a message to YouTube that people like this space. But it's up to you. 500 people watching, and we're very lucky to have this space. Gil says it can't be done, not this way, not at least. Okay, so let's say that the current proposal is a no-go. I think the current proposal is that the Polish would fly the MiG-29s to Germany and then the United States would deliver them or something. So let's say that's a no-go. What do people propose as an alternative? What do people think would be a way of getting these jets into Ukraine? I know people have said wheel them across the border. Is that tenable? Mercury, I'll be honest, Putin is playing this very well at the moment to achieve his goals. The West looking very weak. Galactic North, it feels like Ukraine is using its own populations to demise start World War III. What do you mean by that? What would be the rationale to do that? Mark, this is indeed coming back to resources. It will start with the US stopping European countries finishing Nord Stream 2. Now they're banning Russian oil. Jonathan, I believe that Russia and NATO put themselves in the catch-22. Maybe you want to expand on that. Do you mean in a escalatory spiral? Stefan, to be honest, sending even defensive armory was not a strong yes in the beginning. Now going further with fighter jets doesn't show any larger disagreement. I think there's two different bits there. I think you're talking about the strength of what was provided and also the relative cohesion on that. I think it was very cohesive, whether you disagree on the strength or not. That's just my view. Chev, I read the pilots will get them flying into Ukraine. Graham says, regarding sanctions, no one is ever going to backtrack. Sanctions only get harsher. Harry, US policies in this conflict remind me of that kid in the playground standing in the back prodding someone to do something. Gil, we are discussing fiddling on technicalities, but it's all about how the move is perceived, isn't it? In a way, that is a very, you kind of have got right to the heart of the issue in terms of, in a way, the West wants to provide fighter jets to Ukraine. Ukraine wants fighter jets. Russia is not going to like it, however it happens. It's just trying to find a way to do it, but it is technicalities, right? However the technicality is met, Russia is... If there is a way to get these fighter jets into Ukraine that is deemed as acceptable to the West or the various countries, it's still going to be seen equally as badly by Russia, right? So I'm not clever enough to kind of elaborate that, but welcome, Blackbirds. Jason, let the Ukrainian pilots leave to pick them up, have them loaded. I'm not sure they can cross the border loaded, as far as I understand it. I think they can only cross the border unarmed. Fafnir says wheel them across the border. Stefan, do you think Ukraine would have been attacked if they had been in the EU but not in NATO? That is a great question. If you ask me right now, I would say yes, they would still be attacked. I don't think being in the EU is enough of a deterrent, but I'm not sure. I don't know enough about any kind of defensive pact in the EU, I'm afraid. So I'm not really qualified in any way to answer that. Brian, shit them in pieces. We won't see MiGs on the... It'll be absolutely astonishing to see a MiG-29 on the flight radar, but if we do see it, we will see it here. But I really don't think we'll see any. Mark D. Putin had managed to do the impossible and unify the West. However, the longer this goes on, the more likely cracks would appear. Yeah, again, if you're a realist, as countries do what's right for them, you know, that united front is cracking a bit as countries say, right, this is as far as we want to go. John, how do we get Polish jets to Ukraine? Where will these jets be based? What airbase? How will they be maintained? How will they be fueled? How will they be protected? I think most of the last 4 bits of the answer are already questions in Ukraine for the existing air force. So it's just a question of how you get them more jets. Thomas lands jets on highway and pull them across the border. CP-TO retractors. Gil, Russia will always see it as NATO interference directly. It's just technicalities anyway, and if we're honest, it is just technicalities. I do think you have a very good point there, actually. Bill, I don't think giving Ukraine the jets is worth the risk. Ukraine can be better served with Stingers, Javelins, N-Law rifles, Nammos, grenades, etc. We just have them in kit form. Yeah, did you ever buy those Warplane magazines? I bought a few of those Warplane magazines. It was like first issue 99p. You might get, I think I got a model, I think I got a Tornado. I think I got an RAF Tornado that had articulating wings to go into Delta and regular wing. Didn't buy any more of them. Shane, you kind of hit the nail on the head. However, these planes crossing the borders, pushing Russia to make the next move against the West. Yeah. That's just my view. Yeah, we saw a Viper. Was it Viper 16? F-16 in the air on the previous stream. Brian, I just watched this exact thing in the movie The Darkest Hour. They dropped them outside the Canadian border. What's Russia going to do? What's Russia going to do if they're flown across? I think the risk is the risk of escalation. If you fly them across, if Polish pilots fly them across and then have to be escorted out, if any of those planes are shot down, you risk an Article 5 World War III situation. And as the poll says, you risk a very difficult question to NATO. What if one Russian pilot... Sorry, what if one Polish pilot is shot down? Or what if, in the confusion, a Russian anti-air missile ends up tracking a plane into Poland? And Poland invokes Article 5. You know, NATO's in a difficult position, because if it doesn't recognise it, as people say in the poll, NATO is ended, or NATO looks very weak at least. I'm not sure it'll be ended, but it looks very weak. And if it does invoke it, then over a very small technicality, we have World War III. So, to avoid that, the risk of that happening, I think is why there's these technical questions. There is an Italian tanker on the ground at this Polish Air Force base. The way I'd understood it was that Polish pilots were going to fly into Poland, because on day one of the war there was a Polish MiG-29 that had to fly to Romania because it had a guidance issue. So it flew into Romania, was escorted in by F-16s, landed, fixed, discarded the munitions, I think, and then flew back into Ukraine. Yeah, sorry, I was so to be, if a Russian anti-air missile strayed into Polish territory. Mark says Russia has checkmate NATO. I'm not sure of a position where you checkmate, because I mean, it seems in the conventional war NATO would, you know, win over Russia. And if Putin's only kind of answer to that is to escalate into a nuclear war, is that really checkmate? Village, I can see the argument NATO wants to push Russia into a limited confrontation with them just to prove the value of the alliance. Rebel says NATO wouldn't overreact if there was a single violent incursion. It is a interesting point that I think people have very different views on. And I think some people think any violation immediately Article 5 invocation, full show of strength by NATO. And some people think, well, would NATO think it's worth it? And I appreciate there are very different views along that spectrum, which is interesting that we all have different views. Shane, this is the most intense game of chess we will witness, with a catastrophic ending. I don't know. It seems like if Russia is successful, inverted commas, in Ukraine, using its conventional military, achieves its objectives, I think that's already been shown as to be tolerated by NATO. NATO set its stall out there. The question is, what happens next? What does Russia do next? Oliver, I mean, Netherlands didn't invoke Article 5 and MH17 was shut down. MH17, I think they had to prove and track where the anti-air missile had come from. It was over Ukrainian territory. I don't think the findings were ever recognised by Russia. I'm not sure. I think that would be something for the International Criminal Court. I'm not sure if anything came out of that. But that's why discussion is so good. We all have different ideas. Yeah, I agree. Al, start focusing on the agriculture instead of this endless talk about playing. Feel free to bring up the agriculture, Al. You've got the same voice as everyone else. Village, I don't believe a violation is an automatic Article 5 trigger. It still needs to be requested by the affected nation if there is time to de-escalate. Well, maybe we should have stayed as small hunter-gathering tribes. I think if you're in a small hunter-gatherer tribe, your life is much less secure than it is now, I would imagine. Ronnie, have we not learned from history? 2 Ronnies in the chat. The 2 Ronnies. Peanut, if people think Putin is the only bad player, you're wrong. Matthew, Russia is showing their incompetence once again. This will end badly for Russia and Putin. Fightsmith, Russia is the #1 wheat producer, Ukraine is #5. Captain Polish, Russia has a built-in exit strategy. They just do what they said they would, or they did what they intended to do. Their exit strategy, yeah, so we achieved what we wanted. Landa, the world has shown it is against war. Any country who invades another country after this will feel the same pressure from the rest of the world. Could this be the war to end all wars? I'm not sure there could ever be a war to end all wars. If you believe that the fundamentals of scarcity mean there will always be conflict over scarcity. I mean, even when you throw a piece of bread amongst the pigeons fight over it. It was a little bit Eric Cantona-esque. Dylan, I can't see the cost of Putin's Ukraine escalade as being acceptable to Russian people. Michael Byrne, whataboutism is intellectually dishonest. I'm not a fan of whataboutism, actually. Just me or volumes reload tonight? It might just be you, Mr. Mojo. Mark Williams, all I can say is what an interesting time to be alive in all history. I wonder if we will look at the period, and obviously in the West. So 2 things. I wonder if we will look at the period post the fall of the Soviet Union to 14 days ago as a abnormally peaceful time in Europe. I think what happened in Georgia was the first break of that, and you could say, Chechnya, etc. But generally, from the fall of the Soviet Union to 14 days ago was an abnormally peaceful time in Europe when you look back over time and, you know, Europe being carved in two with the Cold War and before then just like wars after wars after wars between colonial nations and before then. And so that's one thing. And now we revert to the kind of the mean of more wars. The other thing is, I wonder if after the fall of the Soviet Union, the way that the United States played its role as the world's policeman. So, Soviet Union falls, we're now in a hegemony with a singular world superpower, which is the United States, and it is the world's policeman. I wonder if the way that it acted in the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, will be viewed as a mistake and will be viewed as a way that, I don't know how to put this, a missed opportunity to the fall of the Soviet Union seems like that was the time for the international framework, the the ultimate respect for sovereignty, i.e. no country should be able to invade another country. But there's so many blurred lines, when you have dictators, when you have but there are dictators now. So yeah, I don't know. Mark, I really don't like this dismissal of whataboutism. It's basically saying you can't bring up my crimes, I want to discuss yours. People bring up crimes in the past that have been ignored. It's a good point. Maybe excessive whataboutism? Yeah, where is this plane that's 61,000 feet? Is that the plane over Hawaii? Alexander says we were in a wall since the Berlin Wall dropped. I'm not sure about that. Pollock says we can't get rid of all the world's dictators. It's impossible. Some of us married one. Touche. Touche. Patricia, people of Donbass in that peace for 8 years. That's true. Sailor Jimothy, a small NATO country is a NATO country. Polls seem silly. That's your view, Jimothy, Sailor? But, you have a vote like everyone else. Devis, what do you think about NATO? Should exist or based by what NATO peace system? There's a question mark about whether NATO needed to exist after the fall of the Soviet Union. And if NATO didn't exist, then that would be one pretext that Putin wouldn't have to invade Ukraine. But if one of the core drivers of Putin is to restore Russia's former glories, and it doesn't matter whether NATO exists or not, it's just, Ukraine was always going to be a target in that way. Techno, we never really left the Cold War when you break it down. I think it feels like that now, but I don't think it would have felt like that in, I don't think it would have felt like that in 2003, but I may be wrong. Although I think people who really analyse Putin say that the Western interventions in the Middle East really kind of changed Putin's approach to things with the West. chat. David Silva, I can't believe Putin invaded Ukraine because of NATO. What do you think the ultimate rationale was? Well, it doesn't give justification for Putin to take life. Welcome, Kathy from Hawaii. We were just looking at Hawaii on the map. Is that a weather balloon? I wonder if this is... No, that's not... Is that... Hang on, are they both weather balloons? Both about 61,000 feet. Maybe they're weather balloons. What's this? Thought I saw a fighter jet there. Stefan, it's important to distinguish between the obligation of EU members that are members of NATO and EU members who are not members of NATO. Yeah, I don't know what if the EU has if any of the EU treaties have a. I think there are 2 EU treaties on there, 2 main ones. I may be wrong. That have been amended over time. I know there's Treaty of Paris, Treaty of Rome, Treaty of Lisbon, but I thought there were 2 founding documents. But again, I may be wrong. Okay, Jaland, I didn't know that. Internet balloons. No idea about that. These 2 UAE... It's interesting how planes go in a formation like this. Patricia, do you think the role of the EU in this crisis is weak than the power of USA? I think the EU's been very strong in its response, I would say. That's just my view. So, if you believe that Putin's one of the main drivers is Putin's desire to reclaim from Russian glories, and therefore he sees Ukraine as intrinsically part of Russia, then Ukraine, should the West have known that? Should Ukraine have... Is there anything Ukraine could have done? Was it just inevitable? Bill, I think Putin is trying to secure the coastline ports, any possible major cities, and as much farmland as possible. Seems like to get the cities he's struggling. Seems really only Kirsten is the main city that the mayor has said, right, they're going to try and cease the resistance. But for Sumy, for Kharkiv, they haven't got near Dnipro yet, but even for Mariupol, obviously Odessa and Kyiv, they haven't been taken as far as I know. That's true, Michael. They were all brought up by Putin in his speech, I believe. Captain Polish, I think the US is trying to get out and ahead of the situation. I mean, it's interesting. We talk about the world's policeman. That it looked like the United States was going to take a more reduced role in that sense, with the very quick in that sense withdrawal from Afghanistan, and then almost immediately it's been drawn into another conflict, which is very interesting. Jedemar says, right now Putin is trying to reduce civilian casualties. That will eventually change. Shane, I think the West did know that this was coming, but it comes back to what NATO will or won't allow to happen as Putin has pushed the boundaries. Mark D, to be fair, the West did see this coming, hence why Ukraine forces had special training up front. I don't think we have an Odessa camera up here. Some reports of bombardment at the Antonov airport. I mean, the fighting at this airport must just be absolutely just very difficult to comprehend. There has been footage at this airport, and it almost looks like a Call of Duty mission or something. Just so much armor and trucks and destruction and fires. And I think the Antonov 225 was in this hangar. You can see it. It's destroyed. And we saw the footage of the helicopters coming in on the first day off the river. Very surreal here for me. Yeah, very surreal. Yeah, there's a famous saying, I can't remember who said it, but I think it was in World War II or something. A general said, "Oh, in order to liberate that city, we needed to destroy it, or in order to liberate that village, we needed to destroy it." It might have been in Vietnam. In order to liberate the village, we need to destroy it. Doesn't really work for Putin here, because if he's trying to restore Russia's former glories, i.e. Kyiv as a city of incredible history and cultural importance, including within the Soviet Union, but even before then, you can't destroy it. You can't liberate it by destroying it. You can't restore its former glories by destroying it. So as long as that logic holds true, then there is a bit of a bind. But okay, is Sky News a Ukraine channel? No, it isn't. See, Ronnie? Jason, I think Putin is treading carefully. He wouldn't want his front stuck in cities if he decides to operate differently. Might do that airport is so strategic. Little inkling, maybe the US play the media and those MiGs go to Ukraine tonight. Wow. Bill, the US Navy facilitated global trade for 30 years. See, Katie? Sorry, I missed you there. I think the Russians want the train track. Yeah, I've seen videos of Russia sending armoured trains. This is very Snowpiercer-like. What was that other game? Metro. Most of what would happen if NATO put several of their planes up for sale on eBay. I think there is a will to do some. Well, it appeared there was a will to do something, and it was just working out technicalities. Now it appears there might be a difference of will, because it's almost seems like the Polish really don't want to be seen as at the front of this. But I may be reading it wrong. I could be reading it completely wrong. Ableski, how are Ukrainians supposed to operate the MiG-29s? I think they're already operating MiG-29s. I mean, there's footage all the time of Ukrainian aircraft operating over Ukraine. Matthew, his intelligence is what he wants to hear, not what he should hear. This is something we speculated on previous streams, that if your political system becomes more authoritarian, and if you concentrate powers in one individual, then you are more at the whim of the thoughts of that individual. And in terms of business and commerce, at least, even on an international scale, prosperity, and therefore you could say kind of rational decision making that way, seems to be there when countries have specialized roles and industries. So if you concentrate powers, maybe you don't hear the counter arguments, maybe you don't hear that the Russian military is not as effective as it should be. I don't know. Brian, what if we're already playing a shell game, they're already refueling them at the border? I don't know, it could be, I've no idea. The tweets are coming in. Gil, Poland sort of put its neck up. I feel it's to pull the USA in too. Village, is there a general consensus of what losses the military can suffer and still maintain combat efficiency? I don't know, but I think this is why the information is so important, because historically wars have been won and lost not on direct casualties really, but at the point at which the losing army routes, too many groups in that army rout, and that route starts to spread. So morale, and it's not always a question of, you know, the figures. It's more, well, how is that affecting the rest of the deployed Russian army when they hear these things? Are they more likely to surrender, etc.? I would imagine. Kaki, if World War 3 happens, what would be best ties? I don't think World War 3 is going to happen. I know you're in Georgia. I'm very interested to know what the feeling is in Georgia right now. Rebel, I bet you eat bananas without chewing, you strange individual. What? What a weird thing to say. What a weird thing to say. I basically haven't seen any footage of MiG-29s or UFVs. I think is it Su-34s or the bombers? Says. Dylan, what do people think about the UN banning the words war and invasion? I haven't seen that. I'm not sure in what context the UN would ban the words war and invasion. So I've never heard anything like that. Kim, apparently it's snowing in Odessa. I think it is snowing in parts of Ukraine today. We can put the weather up. It's -1 degree in Moldova. Not sure why. Not getting more weather, but there we go. Stefan, one thing I want to quote as a high-ranking former commander said in Swedish Division was that the first thing that dies in the war is a tree. Something to think about. Well, I think the war is, so the information plays a very important part in the war. George Hetzer III, the MiG-29 is a stopgap that I'm hesitant to believe will significantly improve Ukraine's air superiority. They are very short range. Bill, I think that Putin was really smart at taking small slices. Yeah, the salami slicing. But he pushed his luck this time. I don't know. Russia doesn't have the capacity to wage this war for more than a couple of months. Eastern route means essentially when you spread a surrender in the opposing army. So no army is ever going to fight. Well, no invading army is ever going to fight to the last remaining soldier. And when you extrapolate that to different battalions and fighting groups, you know, when the reality is that you're going to lose, that's when you see surrenders. Time, Kirith, you are underestimating Russia's resolve home and abroad. Ukraine going NATO is the equivalent of the USA-Cuban Missile Crisis. Their military doctrine has not been as successful as expected, but yep, agreed. Again, we just don't know if it is. It could be going to plan. And I agree with the point about it being the potential Cuban Missile Crisis. I think we had that as a poll yesterday. Bill, the MiG-29 don't really seem like the best for military aids. Mark D, sounds like the UN bit came from a UN cons first and be leapt on. They overplayed their position. I don't know. Sounds very unusual. I've heard multiple statements given by delegates who are calling it a what? Rock and car? Carl, how are the feelings in England? Well, there's another decision made today to, by the end of the year, to not take any. I think it was Russian oil. I wasn't sure it was oil or gas. So the feelings in the UK, they're obviously still strong. This might be a picture of the train, by the way. The armoured train. Again, I've read, and I don't know, but I've read that the Russian army has more than any other army dedicated groups on rail repair and maintaining railroads, and a lot of its logistics are dependent or based around railroads. Obviously, with Russia being such a big country. So, although this might look strange to kind of by Western invasion standards, might be completely normal for Russia. Should Kazakhstan refuse Putin request send troops to Kenya? I haven't seen that. I heard there are reports about asking troops in Syria to fight, and I don't know too much about that. Baby Cakes, I think it will attack a small country like Ireland. It'd be very weird to attack a small country like Ireland, although I know there was the issue in Ireland, someone driving something into the Russian embassy. Dane says correct on the rail. Also, Ukraine has the same track gauge as Russia. Yeah, so no need to worry about different track gauge, different width of the railroad. Yolanda, yes, the Russian main type of transportation is via railroads. Robert Stresson says Russia has 1,000-strong rail battalion. Okay. George says the S4000 very dangerous. I understand the S400 is in some ways the standard of long-range ground-to-air defense. I don't know, but I understand it is very effective, the S400, and therefore it's even more surprising that the Ukrainian Air Force is able to operate still. It seems, taking the drone separately, that I imagine they're made of different material and have different radar profile or whatever. Max leaves the world the same way we use super highways in the US. Alexander, do you think that Boris Johnson is considering changing his first name now since it's a Russian origin? Might surprise you, but Boris is not Boris Johnson's first name. His first name isn't actually Boris. Liam, I think Putin's words are empty threats. Highly doubt he would do anything drastic if NATO was to implement a no-fly zone. How much kilowatt hour did your gaming rig use? I don't know actually. Don't know. It's not something I account for. Right, what was with that no-fly zone post on the map in USA? Literally, I don't know about that. Mark, does any of this relate to the Falkland Islands? In what way? Cami, so aside from the war, do the Russian people really deserve all the punishment for a situation they have no control over? It's an interesting one, and I think the sanctions... It's an interesting thing, right? Because a lot of the rhetoric was... So, you know, Boris Johnson, for example, said he couldn't believe this was being done in the Russian people's names. A lot of sanctions said this is not direct... We're not against the Russian people, we're against Putin. But the sanctions will not hurt Putin. The sanctions won't mean that Vladimir Putin won't be able to heat his house or, you know, or go hungry. It will hurt ordinary people across Russia. And that's why I think it will be probably messaged in a way that will be saying, hey, look at what the West is doing. We told you the West was against us, and look, at this opportunity they've jumped on it to, you know, starve us and whatnot, so and make us poorer. So there is a contradiction there. The words say it's not against the Russian people, but the effects will be felt by the Russian people. Ultimately, the West is going to be poorer because we're all going to have to pay higher energy costs, heating bills, etc. Russia is going to be poorer. Countries that rely on grain exports are going to be poorer. It's a net loss, I think. I don't think anyone gains from this. Does anyone gain from this? Do Russians really gain from this, even if Putin wins? I don't know. Alex, poverty in Russia is also unlikely to inspire Kyiv, in my view, too. Murray says, don't know, McDonald's closing 800 stores in Russia might upset Putin too. We analysed Putin's speech, and my view is that the way Putin spoke about he used the word euphoria after the fall of the Soviet Union, is that he would not have welcomed McDonald's in Russia. That would have been a harsh projection of American soft power that would have pained him. So I don't... Anyway. Time, yes, it will alienate Russian population for generations. Robert says no one wins a war. Pollitt says millionaires are always made in war. Legalize says there is never a winner in war. Yolanda, no, nobody gains from war. Mercury, yes, China does. I don't think China gains. What did China gain? Carl, the civilians are always the ones that suffer the most in war. Unfortunate truth, no one ever wins. Landar, the Russian people can end this war if they revolt against Putin. Michael, the design isn't to hurt the common man, but that's an unavoidable side effect. It's the money they had to send the war. Yeah, but it's... In a way, it's a very... What's the word? Has a wide area of effect, these economic sanctions. Although they purport to be targeted, really they will end up affecting millions across Russia. Gonna go to 12:30 tonight. Gotta be up early tomorrow. Joe says drop nugs, not bombs. Interesting concept. But designs to somewhat hurt the common man to force retaliation, but I'm not sure that will work. I think it will be messaged in a way against to galvanise the Russian population against the West. But again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. You know, rather than fight this militarily directly in Ukraine, because of the risk of World War III, because of the risk of an Article 5 invocation, there have been incredible economic sanctions applied on businesses in Russia and Russians Visa and MasterCard pulling out, etc. Although Russia will have its own systems. And it affects the Russian population. Ironically, if there was a direct military response, it would affect the Russian army. It wouldn't affect the Russian population. So there's different ways of looking at it. Stefan says nobody wins. See techno. Carrie, this has gone. The level this has gone to is comical. All this is doing is creating a situation where the Russian people turn on the rest of the world because they feel they've forsaken. Captain Purdy, the West economy may actually cover losses more if our priorities shift from import to infrastructure. John, older Russians missed the USSR and backed Putin to the hilt. Stephen, if Russia attacks a NATO country, we'll definitely smoke a bunch of Russian assets in Ukraine's retaliation this afternoon. It kind of reminds me of what happens in... I think it was very recently, but it feels like a long time ago. I seem to remember that there was a Iranian general that was in Baghdad for some meeting, and he was bombed, I think, by America as a purported terrorist. And in response, Iran actually, I think, sent cruise missiles at US bases. And before this, that felt like the closest time that we might end up in a big conflict. But the way that retaliation was by Iran, almost just the US expected it. It's maybe, again, if Russia attacks something in a NATO country, immediately retaliation and then a show of force. Maybe I'm not appreciating that as much. Yeah, Cammy, again, situation after World War I with Germany. I think there are parallels here between... There's already parallels between what happened after World War I and the fall of the Soviet Union with the start of World War II and Russia now making the... What potential parallels, I don't know. Jay, your point on direct military action versus sanctions, affecting military versus people's great... I don't know, I'm just speculating. Maybe wrong. I don't know. I can't see the Russian state channels anymore. Stefan, do we want to hate all Russian people now? I don't think so. I don't think the West hates Russian people, but with 13 days after the invasion and there's a lot to come, There's a lot to come, we just don't know what it's going to be. How are we going to feel if our heating bills have doubled, tripled, and there's more poverty in the West in terms of relative and absolute poverty because of rising energy costs and obviously heavy sanctions, and how, we're so incredibly early in this. I know we've been here for 13 days straight, but it's still so early. It's such a weird place to be in. No need to shout, Mark. I don't know. So if I think some in the West are already trying to label all Russians as bad because of this, yes. John A. Could be more parallels to World War One, sleepwalking into a war because nobody wants to be the first to blink. Yeah, I think actually you're right. Didn't Iran send them a warning? So the bases had time to evacuate, but it was still... Iran sent cruise missiles against US air bases, as a matter of course, and it was expected. And it wasn't retaliated back against. So, I don't know. Peanut, the top map is live UA map. It's a map that goes through some level of verification. As news stories updates, they are geolocated on this map. We actually have a subscription, but it's not working today. And this one down here is Flight Radar 24. Should we Should we track a plane? What's going to be the best plane for us to track? Where's this plane going from? Oh, this is Qatar executive plane from London. Okay. Extremely quiet over Poland. There are only 3 planes over the entirety of Poland right now with transponders on. Isn't that insane? Like a country the size of Poland. Actually, that's not strictly because I think flight radar is still community source, so people have tracking stations and they relay that information to flight radar. On flight radar, there's only 3 Polish aircraft with transponders on. Super low income and even mid will find difficult with rising costs. So how many videos is he flying around and think of fake? We saw a lot of fake aircraft footage in the early days of the war that I recognise from video games, but yeah, how much of it is fake I don't know. Mark Williams, it took a long time for me to realise it's okay to be wrong. Liam, can you show your setup? There's videos on this channel about my setup. Yeah, we have, I haven't got the background now, but we've had ADBS. I can't remember exactly what it's called as well. Well, but no one wins the war. It's true there are degrees of loss, but no one wins. It is late in Poland. It's only 1:30 in Poland though. Graham, why wouldn't the loser not use it? We'll get into that another time. We've spoken it. There could be reasons. Joe, nobody knows what's going to happen, agrees. Again, just want to say another great thanks for the chat we've had today. Such an incredible space we have. We're very lucky to have it here. That's really down to everyone in the chat and the mods. A space where you can ask questions and you can say what your opinion is, and there's enough respect everywhere that it's listened to. You're not just having to shout and only shouting to people that already agree with you. Alison, are there any submarine trackers? For military reasons, I think their entire raison d'etre is not being tracked. That's Mojo. The colour codes of the top map. There's different colour codes for the icons. I think red ones are conflicts. I'm not sure what this is. And the red, I think, is disputed territory, or in this specific instance, territory that is under water control by Russia. Archlayer, how many planes did Poland give Ukraine? The whole thing seems to be up in the air, Archlayer, to be honest. The whole thing is up in the air. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, we're gonna go 5 more minutes. So again, if you've got any other streams that you recommend, put them in the chat. This one here is the live stream events one. You can join this chat where tastes like fish, fish tastes like chicken. P face emoji. People just put in Z in chat. Why would Russia invade itself? Nobody cares about this crap. A shrugging emoji and then fingers crossed, which actually is probably quite a nice one. Thank God Britain left the EU. Very divisive. So if you want to be in this chat, you can be in this chat. There was another stream I saw where, rather cynically, I would say, it's a members only chat. So that is perhaps the other the other extreme is having a members only chat, which is, I've run this channel for a few years now and I've never ever done that. But I can see why, each their own. Agenda-free TV. So yeah, again, another stream today. And be here again about 10 PM tomorrow and see how things progress. I mean, to me, it feels like there was that initial, things were happening so quickly at the beginning, it was so alien, and I do think there has become more. I've definitely become more desensitized to it. The progress appears to have slowed, but was that just our expectation based on how shocking and quickly things are moving at the beginning? I don't know. There's definitely more time and space now to think about the geopolitical implications, and I think in this stream we've always been ahead of the curve on that. The words NATO, UNSC have always been in the name of this stream since day one, and it's interesting to see how it's all playing out. Thanks everyone. Do free to subscribe if you want as well, and if you want to drop a like as well. That I don't normally in my other streams I have animations and things like that that say, oh, smash that like button, but I don't think it's appropriate. But if you want to like the stream, you can do that. Hey Ray, good to see you. Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. So yeah, going to go to our members page. Oh, thanks Michael for becoming a KRT Lieutenant. Thank you so much, Michael, for supporting the stream. Yeah, and again, if you have any resources that you think, because all the money that this channel makes from YouTube goes back into the channel. I actually spend more money on this channel than I make from it, even though it's a fairly big channel and there's advertising revenue. Sim racing is very expensive. But if you have any resources you recommend that we subscribe to that would enhance the stream, we can pay for it. It's not a problem. The adverts, the donations, the memberships, they are there to support this channel and enhance the channel for everyone's benefit. So if you have any resources you think we could subscribe to or pay for, then let me know in the comments to these videos, and we can 100% do that like we've subscribed to these two. But yes, thank you so much everyone. I'm going to go to our members page. Sorry Stefan, that was in Swedish. We don't understand it. And yeah, have a very good night's sleep if you're in the UK or the EU or that part of the world. If you're in the US, Australia, Africa, then have a great time of day wherever you are. And I'll see you on the next one. I'll see you next time.
There was a wild ride, I know at the start you were curious, but my goodness, that was fast and furious. All the intensity we had, we've come to the end, now that's too bad. But the energy threw books off the shelf, and we hope you all enjoyed yourselves. Enjoy yourselves. We will go all the way. It's not about the trend. Keep going now. Keep going till we reach the end. Till we reach the end. If you had a good time being part of this journey, and the thrill is now making you thirsty, if you want to keep seeing the action, then just drop us a like so you can come back for more. If you're new here, we welcome you with a smile. If you like what you saw, just hit subscribe. We appreciate each and every one of you tuning in to see a Kyiv card. Join us for the next part. Hope to see you again soon.